right, we're going to go ahead and get started then. Hello everyone, thank you for coming. My name is Megan Cannell. I'm the Crime Prevention Officer here at the City. I've got with us our Public Safety Manager, Lee DeRico, and one of our Community Service Officers, Marlene Navarro. Got to cover a lot of information tonight, so please bear with me. I'm going to break it up into sections. We'll open it up for questions after each section, but other than that, I ask that you please hold them because I want to make sure I get you guys out of here at a reasonable hour. So we're going to go ahead and get started. We're here to talk about child safety. First thing with child safety is parental responsibility. Okay, kids learn primarily from example. Just like that last little video that we saw, children see, children do. You know, you've heard the whole monkey see, monkey do. It's the exact same thing. They learn from example from their friends at school, teachers, people on the street, people at church or wherever it is that they go, people at the supermarket. And they learn that certain things are okay to do because they see other people doing them. That being said, the people they're most going to emulate are going to be their parents. However you are as parents at home, that's how your kids are going to grow up to be like. So you really need to make sure you set a good example now so that you can limit or prevent issues later. And a lot of people don't necessarily realize this, but parents can be held responsible for the actions of their children. A good example is truancy citations. If your kid's skipping school and they get caught by the sheriff's department and they get a citation, guess what? You get one too, and you have to go to court with your kid. So just be aware that if your kid messes up and gets in trouble with the law, you can also be held responsible. Child seats. I'm just going to touch on this real quick. There are a whole bunch of things that you may or may not know. You may have some little knowledge of but not really understand. Latch is the system that the U.S. government has determined is probably the safest thing. It stands for lower anchors and tethers for children. You can use it with or without a seat belt. Studies have shown there's no advantage or disadvantage either way. It doesn't change anything. It's required on all car seats made after 2002 and most cars made since then. There are 4 stages of child restraints. There's the rear-facing infant seat, which is for kids up to a year or up to 20 pounds. There's the forward-facing toddler seat, which is designed for kids between 20 and 40 pounds or 1 to 4 years generally. There's the booster seat, which lifts them up, and they use the regular seat belt with that. It's generally for kids 4 to 6, 4 to 7, depending on their height and weight. And then there's the regular seat belt that we wear every day. Like I just said, they're based on the child's weight and their height as well to maximize safety so that if that happens, your kids are safe. Under California Vehicle Code, if your kids are under 6 years old and under 60 pounds, they must be in the rear seat in some sort of child restraint system. A seat belt by itself is not enough. They can be in the front seat if there's no rear seat. If the rear seats face backwards or sideways, like the pickup truck's little jump seats that face sideways. If all the back seats are occupied by other children that are under 12 years old. Medical necessity, if you can't get them into the back seat because of a medical condition, with that you may have to provide satisfactory evidence to the court to prove that it's a medical necessity for them to be in the front seat. Or if you can't install child restraints properly in the rear, obviously you can't put the kid back there. However, if you have an active passenger airbag in the front seat, you cannot put a rear-facing child seat in the front seat at all. And even if it's a forward-facing child seat, if the kid's under a year old or under 20 pounds, it can't be in the front seat. Kids that are over 60 pounds or between 6 and 16 must be in either a child restraint system or a seat belt as appropriate. I know a lot of us like to think, oh, if only I could get my 16-year-old to sit in the car seat. It's so much nicer in the car, but it doesn't work that way. But you have options, you know, based on your kid's size and weight and height and everything. The National Traffic Highway Safety Administration recommends that all kids that are under 4'9" be in a booster seat, and that's to make sure that the seat belt actually sits across their chest properly and doesn't cut off their breathing at their throat or anything like that. It needs to make sure it's at the right height so that if you get into a car crash, the seat belt can do its job. You've probably seen the commercials or seen the newspaper ads, 4'9" is the magic number, or 4'9", I'm doing fine, things like that. Now with either of these, when it comes to children not being in a proper child restraint, this is a primary offense. You can be pulled over for this and this alone. So keep that in mind. If you need help checking to make sure your child seats are properly installed, You can visit any CHP office. The one out here is on 20th Street East, or 20th Street West and Avenue I. It's between in and out in the freeway on the north side of the street. They're open 9 to 5 Monday through Friday. You can give them a call or walk in. They'll check it out for you to make sure you've got it installed properly so you've got no problems there. And they do that for free. According to the National Highway Traffic Safety Administration, 3 out of 4 car seats are not installed correctly. So you definitely want to make sure you get that checked out. Any questions about child seats or parental responsibility? Yes. What's that? I'm sorry? If you have a seatbelt on? If you have a seatbelt on, you just got to make sure you're the right height so that it actually fits across you properly and protects you right. Yes. Yeah? Okay. All right, from there, back to school for kids. You may notice throughout this presentation I kind of jump back and forth with some of this stuff. Some things are obviously directed more towards parents. Some things are directed more towards kids. For kids, stick to the same safe routes, okay? Take the same way to school every day. Take the same way home from school every day. Take the route that you know is safe, you are familiar with, and whatnot. Know who the trusted adults are, your parents, your friends' parents, your teachers, the principal, people like that, so that if you get into trouble, you know who you can turn to for help. Never cross the street without looking both ways before you step off the curb to make sure it's clear, and only cross at a corner or crosswalk. Anywhere else is jaywalking. Okay, if there's a crossing guard there, wait for them to tell you that it's okay to cross. If there are crossing signals where you have to push the button to wait for the light, use them and wait for the light. If the walking light turns red before you step off the curb, don't step off the curb. You press the signal and wait for the next time it turns white. Don't take valuables or electronics to school, iPods, cell phones, laptops, MP3 players, anything like that. This is the number one thing that gets stolen both at schools and throughout the city is small electronics. If you have to take a cell phone or something like that with you, don't advertise that you have it. Put your ringer on silent and never ever leave it unattended. Keep it on you at all times. Don't expect leaving it in your locker or your car is going to keep it safe either. Lockers and cars get broken into at schools just as much as anywhere else. If you see any suspicious behavior, whether it's a group of kids that look like they're going to start to fight, or they're planning a fight for after school, or you see somebody with a weapon, or you think somebody's smoking marijuana or anything like that in the bathroom, anything suspicious, report it. Tell a teacher, tell the school security, tell the principal, tell somebody. They can't do anything about it if you don't tell them. Now for parents, you should know your child's route to and from school and any after-school activities, things like sports teams, Girl Scouts or Boy Scouts, church groups, anything like that. And again, so that you know where they're at, so if something happens, you can find them. This is a biggie with parents. Obey all traffic signals, signs, and speed limits. One of the biggest complaints we get from people is that parents of kids at schools are just speeding through their neighborhoods. They're not paying attention. They're not stopping at stop signs. They're double parking at schools. You need to pay attention to things like that. The signs are there for a reason, and it's for safety. In a school zone, if there are no signs posted, it starts 500 feet before the school and goes until 500 feet after the school. 25 miles an hour anytime kids are arriving at or leaving from school. With the high schools, when kids are leaving for their lunch break, that includes the lunch break. If there is no fence or other physical barrier between the school and the street, it's 25 miles an hour all day. As long as school's in session, that's 25 miles an hour. Like I said, never double park even for a moment. We tell kids, go to the corner, wait for the crossing guard, wait for the signal, use the crosswalk. But they don't always do that, and we know that. So you need to limit the hazards that you're creating for them by making those blind spots when they step off the curb in between cars. When dropping your kids off at school, always watch to make sure they actually get on campus. A lot of truants that I've heard from or talked to or heard from the parents, the kids wait till mom and dad are out of sight and then they just go elsewhere. So always if you're going to take them yourself, make sure they're actually on campus before you leave. It also helps to make sure they get to school safely. Like I said, it helps deter truancy. Same rules for all of this apply to any extracurricular activities or sports. If you're dropping your kid off at football practice, make sure they actually get to the practice. Things like that. Don't double park when you're picking them up from Girl Scouts or soccer practice or anything. Just some general tips real quick. Excuse me. Don't put your kids' names on their backpacks, their sweatshirts, things like that. Inside on a tag or something where it's hidden out of view, that's fine. Don't put it on the outside, clear as day across their backpack. That gives strangers, undesirable people I should say, an in to start a dialogue with your kids and develop a false sense of security. Oh, hey, Johnny, you know, your mom was telling me to look for you because she was trying to let you know that she's not going to be able to do this. You know, things like that. So don't open that door for somebody. A lot of people like to think that they know this, but a lot of people, if you really push them, they'll admit that they don't. Know the names and phone numbers of your kids' friends and their parents. Hey, I'm going over to Mikey's house after school. Okay. Then say you've got an emergency. You need to go pick up your kid at Mikey's house. You can call and say, hey, it's Johnny's mom. I've got an emergency. I got to come pick Mikey up right now. Or, hey, can you watch him for a few more hours while I take care of this? Things like that. Also, if you've got a problem child who tends to tell you one thing but goes somewhere else, you can check up on him that way if you really feel you need to. This is really important. Stay involved. Know what's going on in your kids' lives. The earlier you develop a dialogue with your kids, the better sense of trust you're going to develop between you and your kids. The stronger that trust and that bond, the more likely they're going to open up to you if something happens. They'll tell you when they're being bullied. They'll tell you if they're having problems in school or problems with their friends or whatever's going on. Also pay attention to any changes in your kids' behavior, their personality, their activities. You know, if you've got a kid who used to love to go outside and play and now all of a sudden they just want to stay in their room all the time, that could be a red flag for something. Any questions about any of that stuff? Okay. All right, for when your kids are out and about. Okay strangers versus unknown strangers. An okay stranger is somebody that your kids can go to for help if they need it. An unknown stranger, you don't know. It's truly that simple. However, don't use uniforms to define the difference. Okay, a sheriff's deputy is an example of an okay stranger. The mailman or the UPS carrier, those may not be examples of okay strangers. They're unknowns. How many of us actually talk to our mailman on a regular basis? Not very many. The UPS guy or the FedEx guy, we'll see them once in a blue moon, and it's usually never the same guy. So things like that. Don't use uniforms to define the difference. They can actually confuse the issue for some kids, but it's important to stress that just because they're wearing a uniform doesn't mean that they're okay. Stranger rules, okay? You know, the whole stranger danger thing. I don't like calling it that, but I do call it the stranger rules. Don't accept candy, gifts, or rides unless your parents specifically tell you it's okay. That's from anybody, okay? Your family's leaving the restaurant, the cashier offers you a candy. Mom, is it okay if I take that? You know, it doesn't matter who it is, the dentist, anybody. Don't accept it without your parents' specific permission. Never tell a stranger your name or address. You don't want somebody to follow you home or to be there waiting for you. You don't want somebody to develop that false sense of trust when they know your name. And don't give a stranger directions or help them look for something, okay? Adults should not be asking kids for help finding a lost dog. Asking them, hey, have you seen my dog? That's one thing. But, hey, little girl, can you help me look for my puppy? That's not okay. And kids should not be helping adults who are asking that. They should go find somebody that they can trust and say, hey, this guy's asking me to help him find his puppy, but I don't know him or anything like that. So make sure you teach your kids that it's not okay for adults to be asking little kids for help with things like that, directions. A lot of little kids don't know the directions to point A, point B. Older kids might, but younger kids don't. So it's really out of place for an adult to be asking a young kid, hey, how do I get to this place or how do I get to that place? If you're ever being followed, turn around and go the other direction, especially if you're being followed in a car, because it's a lot harder for a car to turn around in traffic than it is for somebody on foot. But it doesn't matter who it is, turn around and go the other way. Make sure you find a trusted adult right away, too, so to let them know, hey, this guy's following me. I don't know who he is. If a stranger ever tries to grab you, run and scream. Yell something like, "This isn't my mom," or "This isn't my dad. I don't know you." Something like that to get the attention of other adults in the area so somebody can intervene and call for help. Because dangerous strangers don't like attention. And always, anything that happens involving a bad stranger, make sure you tell your parents about it. Somebody offers you candy, somebody asks you for help, somebody tries to grab you, somebody follows you, somebody just makes you uncomfortable. Tell your parents. Always take a friend. There is safety in numbers. Bad strangers will often choose kids that are by themselves when they're actively prowling for something, because it's a lot easier to take on one kid than to take on 3 or 4. Never go anywhere without telling your parents first. If something should happen to you, or the other side, if your parents need to find you because something happened elsewhere and they need to pick you up to go take care of it, they need to know where you're at. Again, if something bad happens, your parents will know where to look for you. Okay, remember curfew laws, too. After 10 o'clock, minors need to be inside. The only exceptions are if they're with their parent or guardian, they're at a legitimate social function like a away game for a sports team in high school or something like that, or a church group. A house party is not a legitimate social function. You can be cited for curfew for being at your friend's house at 11 o'clock having a party when mom and dad aren't there. The other exception is if you're going directly from point A to point B and you have legitimate reasons to be at both of those points. Maybe you're leaving the sports thing to go straight home. Those are the only exceptions. I'm going to tell you the third one's really hard to prove. Avoid back alleys, dark streets, isolated areas, things like that unless absolutely necessary and with a trusted adult. Especially at night or in out-of-the-way places, bad strangers have more time because there are fewer people around. It's more isolated. Maybe you can't be heard as easily if you yell out for help. When you're at home, never ever tell anyone that your parents aren't home. Notice how I don't say that you're home alone, because you might be home with your friends or your brothers and sisters, whatever it may be. Don't tell anybody that your parents aren't home. That's the important part. Whenever you're answering the phone, never give out your name. Tell the caller mom or dad is busy, offer to take a message. If they won't leave one, tell them, well, you need to call back later then. If you have an answering machine, easiest of all, let it pick up instead. Now, if a caller is insistent, rude, makes you uneasy, maybe they won't give you any information, they're insisting on you telling them your name first, don't be afraid to hang up on them. It's perfectly fine. If you're getting scared or somebody's making you uncomfortable on the phone, hang up on them. You don't need to be dealing with that. You're not mom or dad. You're not the one that can deal with it in the same way, so just hang up. And make sure you tell your parents about all phone calls. Everything from, okay, this guy was saying some weird stuff in the phone, and I think it was dirty, or maybe grandma called. Hey, she wants you to give her a call back because she wants the cookie recipe or something. Any kind of phone call, tell your parents. When you're answering the door, always look through the peephole first. If you use a step stool if necessary. If you don't have a little peephole in your door, look out the front window, see who's there. Also ask through the door who's there before you ever open it. Okay, you want to do both those things, look and ask. Because if they say UPS and they're just wearing jeans and a white t-shirt, you know they're not UPS. We all know UPS guys wear the brown uniforms and whatnot. Postal carriers have their uniforms. Police officers have their uniforms. So we can, with some of these things that might engender a sense of trust, oh, sheriff's department, just need to talk to you for a moment. Well, you look out the window and you see somebody in jeans and a t-shirt, you know they're not from the sheriff's department. Never ever open the door to anyone you don't know and trust. Even if you do know and trust them, if your parents aren't home, you might want to say, hey, look, mom and dad are busy. Can you come back later? I'll talk to you then. Like I said, tell the person mom or dad is busy, regardless of who it is. And again, never give out your name or other details. If somebody ever tries to force the door open, starts banging really loud on the door, otherwise makes you scared, maybe they seem like they're trying to go around the back fence, call 911. You don't know what that person's trying to do. If they're scaring you, you call 911. Now, along those lines, speaking of calling 911, it's really important, kids, to know that 911 is for emergencies only, okay? It's free to call from any phone, including payphones. I know there's not very many of those left anymore, but if you happen to find one, you can call 911 from it if you need to. However, prank calling it is not only illegal, but it's dangerous. You can be fined or arrested for improper use of 911. And not just that, but it ties up the lines for somebody who really needs it. If you're calling 911 and you hang up, 911 you hang up, 911 maybe you just leave it open now, just leave the phone hanging and walk off. If somebody else over here just had a nasty traffic accident and there are people hurt and they can't get through because you've got the line tied up with the phone that's just hanging, that's bad news for these people. So make sure that you don't prank call it. It's very bad news. You can use 911 anytime that you're seriously hurt or sick, somebody else is seriously hurt or sick. You see crime happening, like a robbery, a burglary, anything like that. If there's a bad traffic accident. A lot of people don't know this, but if kids get lost, they can call 911, and wherever they're at, whether it's Sheriff's Department, Police Department, CHP, somebody will come out and get them and help them get back to where they belong. Or if a stranger is scaring you, you're walking down the street, somebody's following you, you can't shake them, you can't find somebody that you can trust that's an adult, you can call 911 and they'll come help you out. Any questions on that stuff? All right. Now the fun part that's coming up in just a few short weeks. All right, Halloween costumes. Costumes should be made of flame-resistant or flame-retardant material. If your costume that you're wearing or purchasing for your kid does not specifically say flame-resistant or flame-retardant, you can safely assume that it is not. So get a do-it-yourself spray and just treat the fabric real quick. You should plan costumes that are bright and reflective. Sorry, I'm a little behind myself here. Plan costumes that are bright and reflective. If they're not bright and reflective on their own, get some reflective tape. Put it at the bottom hem, on the sleeves, up the back of the sleeve, maybe on their back, things like that, so that when they're out trick-or-treating, cars that might be coming up behind them, if they're wearing an all-black costume, if you don't have that reflective tape, the car coming up behind them is never going to see them. And not just that, but other trick-or-treaters with their flashlights and whatnot will be able to see them so they don't run into them on the street. Makeup and wigs are better than masks. Masks block eyesight. It's a lot easier to trip on things, trip over things, run into things, get hurt. You don't see the cars coming when you're looking both ways to cross the street because your field of vision is only like this instead of being like this. Better alternative is face paint or makeup. Make sure it's non-toxic. If your kid's going to wear a wig or a hat, make sure that it fits properly so it doesn't keep sliding down in front of their eyes, because then it's no better than a mask. Costumes and shoes should fit well to avoid tripping. You don't want your kid to remember Halloween as the night they sprained their ankle or skin their knees really bad or anything like that. Use caution with simulated weapons. A lot of kids like to go as pirates or cowboys or ninjas or stuff like that. And you know how kids are. They want to get in their little play sword fights or things like that. Simulated weapons, there's two reasons for this. One, you want to make sure they don't look too real, because some parent that's not involved might look at them and be like, oh my goodness, he's got a gun, and call 911. Bad news. The other reason is if your kids do get into a play fight with each other and one of them happens to fall on top of one of the fake swords, that way they don't get hurt. You want it to be flexible, soft, something that's not going to hurt them, blunted tips, things like that. Each child should take a flashlight with fresh batteries, and I do mean each child. You can get them for about $1 at the dollar store. Batteries are another, depending on where you go, sometimes you can get 2 batteries for $1. So it's not expensive, it's well worth it. That way if they do find a dark corner, street lights are all well and good, but they're not perfect. And there are some streets where they're fairly far apart. So you want to make sure you've got a way for your kids to light up those dark areas. And this may seem unusual to some people for us to suggest, but it's really a good idea. Some kind of ID bracelet. It has your kid's ID, basic ID info, not talking social security number and fancy stuff like that, just name, address, phone number, date of birth, and then emergency contact info, your name or whoever's name, and their phone number, like a cell phone or something. That way if your kid gets separated from the group, they can find somebody that can help them get back to the right place. Oh, hey, Mrs. So-and-so, your kid just found me. I don't know where you live. Can you please come pick him up? I'm at such and such. Things like that. Or if they get separated and they call 911 and a deputy comes and picks them up, they'll have that for the deputy to return them home. Just tuck it discreetly in their costume. If they're wearing short sleeves, put it on a necklace or on an anklet, something like that instead. Decorations. Let your kids help design the jack-o'-lanterns, but adults do all the carving. And that's kind of for obvious reasons. Kids and knives often don't mix. Never use open flames in unprotected spaces. If you're going to have a candle, it should be in an enclosed candle holder, like with a little lantern or something, or it should be inside a jack-o'-lantern. Better alternative is those little battery-operated candles. Look for trip hazards before trick-or-treaters arrive. Flower pots, garden hoses. If you've got a tree root in your front yard, that obviously we can't really take care of a tree root very easily by ourselves without going to a great deal of time and expense. Put some visual barrier there, some decorations or a big planter or something. That way kids don't try and go over the tree root, they know to go around. Use electric decorations only as recommended. Don't overload your outlets. Don't use indoor decorations outdoors, etc. Water your lawn in the morning, or better still the night before, so that your lawn's not all muddy and slick for kids to slip on. And make sure that any decorations or candles that you do have are set far enough back that trick-or-treaters aren't going to trip over them, they're not going to catch their costumes in the flames, etc. Now when it comes to trick-or-treating, always trick-or-treat in groups. Again, safety in numbers. Parents, know who your kids are going to be with, who's the responsible person. Know their cell phone number. Know the planned route. Have an agreed upon time for your kids to be back. Never stop at homes whose porch light is not on. Not only are they probably not home or they're not interested in giving out candy, but you can't see what trip hazards they may have on their porch if the lights are off. So don't even waste your time. Never enter the home of anyone that both the kids and the parents know well. If you guys both know them well, maybe it's your next door neighbor, your cousin, something like that, that's one thing. Maybe your parents know the neighbors, but you don't go in. Maybe you know the neighbors because they're your friends from down the street, but your parents don't go in. Again, only cross at designated crossings, corners, crosswalks, things like that. And always look both ways to make sure it's clear before you step off that curb. For parents, pets, especially dogs and cats, but really any kind of pet that's going to be free roaming, even a bird in a bird cage should probably be put in a back bedroom or a bathroom or something to keep them a little more insulated from the noise and hubbub. Dogs get excited. They're going to want to get out. They're going to want to see all the trick-or-treaters. Maybe they get scared and they want to run. Cats are curious. Cats like to get out too. So make sure you keep them segregated. Keep them locked up in the bedroom or something like that. A lot of people think it's okay, just put their dogs outside. Well, all they're going to do is annoy their neighbors when the dog's yapping all night because there are kids going back and forth constantly. So things like that to keep in mind. Make sure you have current ID on all your pets, current tags, all that. So if they do happen to somehow escape, they can still be brought back home should they be found. Always discuss appropriate versus inappropriate behavior with your kids. Things like the ring and ditch, or whatever it's called, where they ring the doorbell and run away. On Halloween night, trick or treat, okay, maybe that's acceptable for Halloween, depending on your opinions of it. It's between you and your kids. Things like throwing eggs or TPing a house, that may not be appropriate, even for Halloween. So you need to have your boundaries and set them and make sure that your kids understand and are aware of what your expectations are as to what is or is not appropriate. And, of course, the old standby, don't eat the candy till I get a chance to look through it. Parents, you should make sure you take the time, look at every piece. You're looking for torn packaging, spoiled goods, tampered goods, things like that. All right, any questions about Halloween? I know you guys have some. No? All right. I'm going to spend a little bit of time on bullying. This is actually a really important thing here. Bullying is a big issue, actually, pretty much anywhere in the world that you go. It's huge right now. It's just something that's getting worse. It's not the same thing that we think about from 30, 40, 50 years ago, even 20 years ago, where it's, give me your lunch money or I'll beat you up type thing. We're talking all sorts of stuff. Some of it's really nasty. What you see here are 13 pictures of kids who committed suicide from bullying. I'm not going to go into too many details because we do have young ones in the audience here. Alexis Pilkington was 17 years old. She was a soccer star with a bright future, had enough credits to graduate high school early, already had a soccer scholarship to college. Brandon Myers was a bubbly young boy. He had issues from a cleft palate, but other than that, he was very happy and overall well-liked. There's just a few bad kids that really got to him. He was 12. Jessica Logan was 18 years old. She made one bad mistake, sent one compromising photo to a boyfriend who later broke up with her and spread it around. She actually ended up going on local TV news to warn other girls about the dangers of doing that very same thing, and 2 months later, we lost her. Carl Joseph Walker Hoover was 11. He loved football, was a great kid, always had a smile on his face, but some people just didn't like him for whatever reason. Hope Witzel was 13. She was another one that had issues with compromising photos that got out and caused problems for her. Kimberly Linteski was 12. Let's see, what was her? She actually endured a lot of bullying. She finally had enough and threw a punch back, got sent home early from school, and that was the day that we lost her. Megan Myers, probably the most famous. She was 13. If she would have lived a couple more weeks, she would have seen her 14th birthday. This one's famous in part because of the MySpace part of it. Her ex-best friend's mom created a fake MySpace account and manipulated her with it and basically said some very nasty things and spread them around through mutual friends of the two girls. The mom was actually tried in federal court. She was convicted on one charge, but it was later overturned on appeal. Phoebe Prince was an Irish immigrant. She was 15 this January when she died. 6 teenagers were actually charged with felony counts relating to her death. 3 of them also had additional juvenile charges, including assault with a deadly weapon. Jaheim Herrera was in 5th grade. He was 11 years old. He endured constant taunts about where he was born, how he looked, things like that. And he wasn't a bad kid. He wasn't an unliked kid. Just certain people, again, you get a few bad seeds. April Himes was 13 on Valentine's Day of 2000. She had already missed 53 days of school that school year because of bullying, and she had attempted suicide once before. And the morning that we lost her, she got a call from the school saying, be in school or face a truancy board. And in her state, if you face a truancy board, that usually means jail time, juvie jail. Eric Mohat was 17 years old. He loved theater arts and drama, dressed a little eccentrically, got taunted a lot because of it. He was the 3rd of 4 students that committed suicide because of bullying that year. A 5th, his best friend, almost did 2 weeks after he died. But his parents pulled him out of school just in the nick of time. Jared High, in May of 1998, endured a severe beating. We're talking 10 minutes long, prolonged. The doctor said that his injuries were consistent with those you'd see from a serious car crash. Broken hip, broken bones everywhere, all sorts of nasty bruises and swelling. Suffered from months of depression after that, and finally just said, I quit. Ryan Halligan was 13 years old. He actually endured bullying, and then he learned Tai Bo. He taught himself Tai Bo from the little video sets and fought off his bullies, and actually later became friends with one of them. And then that friend turned around and backstabbed him. You know, he told an embarrassing story in confidence, and the friend took it and spread it to everyone and twisted it a little bit, put a few slants on it that were unsavory. And then another girl over the summer kind of did the same thing to him, befriended him, and then turned around and stabbed him in the back. He actually called his father to say goodbye, and we lost him while he was on the phone with his dad. So those are those 13 kids, and there are many, 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 many more. Do an internet search for bullying and suicide, anything like that. You're going to find tons of them, page after page of stories and pictures. Okay. Bullying can take many forms. It can be physical violence. It can be taunts and teasing. Yes, sir? Yeah, if you go around to the north door, it's next to the parking lot. Okay, you might want to try knocking on it. You want to go check and see?
Yeah. You If you want, you have your breakfast, write it, and then I'll meet you on that side.
Sorry about that. You're welcome. Sorry about that. Okay, physical violence, taunts, teasing, name-calling, gossip and rumors, whether they're true or not. Breach of trust, again, like Ryan, where he had befriended one of the bullies, told an embarrassing story, who then went and turned around and spread it. Social exclusion, you're not good enough to hang out with us. Intimidation, there's all sorts of forms it can take. It can affect kids and adults of all ages. The only difference is that with adults it's usually called harassment. It's not limited to school settings. It can be online, offline, in school, after school, before school, at church, at the restaurant, at the playground. It can be anywhere. Bullies can be any gender, any age, ethnicity, social status. Most bullies are guys, but not all. And in fact, in a lot of cases, it's the girls that can actually be the most vicious. Social status, we all like to think of the bully that, oh, he's just trying to make himself feel better, he's jealous of you. That's not the case anymore. It's not like it was 20, 30 years ago. Cyberbullying is bullying by electronic means. We're talking about the internet mostly, but also text messages, phone calls, internet chat rooms, instant messengers, things like that. It can be just as devastating, if not worse. According to the National Center for Bullying Prevention, over 160,000 students stay home from school every day because they're being bullied and they just want to escape it for a day. They're afraid it's going to continue or it's going to get worse. Victims of bullying suffer from loss of concentration. Their grades start to slip. They lose their self-esteem and their motivation. They just completely do a 180. You've got this great, happy, outgoing kid who's excelling in school. Now all of a sudden they're moody, withdrawn, their grades are sliding, they can't focus. All they want to do is hide in their room all day. Bullying victims are also more likely to report physical symptoms, headaches, nausea, depression, anxiety, things like that. Sometimes it's a fake, so they can just be like, oh, I don't feel good, I don't want to go to school today, can I stay home? It's because they don't want to deal with the bullying. But sometimes it's legitimate, too. And as we know, bullying can have devastating consequences. We just saw the pictures of those 13 kids. There's also the other side of it. A lot of us know about Columbine High School and several other school shootings like that. There are two ways to it. Bullying victims often only have two ways to deal with it, especially with the worst bullying. They can either direct it inwards at themselves, and if it goes far enough, we've seen what can happen, or they can direct their rage outwards, and if they can't get their bully back, they'll get anybody back. And that's why we see those sorts of incidents. A national survey in 2001, this isn't on here, but a national survey in 2001 of 15,000 6th to 10th graders reported that 30% of them had an experience with bullies, whether they were a bully themselves, they were a victim, or they were both. Believe it or not, victims can and do turn into bullies themselves. Bullying affects witnesses too. Many report feeling unsafe or like they're going to be the next target if they try and intervene, which is really kind of ironic because studies show that peer intervention is the #1 way to stop a bully. In over 55% of bullying situations, when a peer intervened, the bullying stopped. Maybe not altogether, but at least for that moment. And the more that happens, the stronger it's going to stop overall. Excuse me. Like I said, bullying is a real problem. It's not a normal part of growing up. It's not kids being kids or anything like that. It's a serious problem, serious issue. Victims of severe bullying often suffer from lifelong psychosocial problems, social inadequacy, things like that. Both bullies and victims are more likely to abuse alcohol or drugs at some point in their lives. Victims tend to abuse later on. When they're coping, they're trying to, okay, I'm through it, I just got to deal with it, whatever. Bullies, believe it or not, and this may surprise some of you because of the ages of a lot of these kids, that a lot of bullies are drunk or high when they're doing the bullying. They may already have emotional control issues or impulsivity issues, and when they're under the influence of alcohol or drugs, their inhibitions are gone and now they have no control. So everything just comes flooding out. Bullies usually have average or high self-esteem and bully others for the social status and popularity. This is not to say that they bully other people to improve their social standing. What they're trying to do is increase the distance between where they already know that they're at. Remember, these are confident kids. They're already popular, and all they want to do is make their victim even less popular so that they look even better by comparison. It's one of those things, the popular kid, you don't mess with the popular kid because they'll ostracize you, and you don't want to be the one that's on their bad side. And when it's the popular kids, other people that are around might kind of join in, not necessarily because they want to or because they actually feel that way, but because they don't want to be ostracized by the popular kids. Every kid wants to be part of the in crowd. Many bullies come from homes where parental supervision is lacking, whether a single parent working 2 jobs, mom and dad working late hours, whatever the case may be. The parents are usually either overly permissive, the kids can get away with anything, or they're overly strict. Kind of like the old stereotypical dad who gets his belt out whenever Junior screws up. Those are the things that you typically find in homes of bullies. Warmth or love towards the child is lacking. The parents just don't care. And probably first and foremost, again, this goes back to children see, children do, children learn by example. One or both of the parents engage in bullying behavior at home. And when I say at home, I mean outside of school. We're talking, it could be domestic violence, it could be road rage, it could be getting drunk and belligerent, it could be anything. If they're a bully outside of school, when they're on family time, the kid's more likely to be a bully in school. Cyberbullying, again, it's bullying by electronic means. A lot of bullying victims are bullied both online and offline. I mean, the prevalence of electronic media, we've all got cell phones and computers pretty much these days. It can actually be a lot more vicious than in-person bullying because rumors, photos, text messages, all that kind of stuff spreads within minutes to hundreds of people. It's not like the old days when you actually had to call somebody on the phone or see them face to face, and it could take days or even weeks for something to spread. By then it's lost its momentum. It's not like that. It spreads like wildfire now. And the problem with cyberbullying is that because of the prevalence of electronic media in our lives, kids use the internet every day for their homework, things like that. That's how they keep in touch with their friends, is through text messages or social networking. There's really no reprieve. It's not like, okay, you get bullied at school, you come home, you just hide in your house for the rest of the day. And then you go back to school, you've gotten a little rest, you've had a little breather, you can deal with it again. It's not like that. It doesn't stop just because they've left school. It can actually lead to accelerated problems. Thoughts of suicide and whatnot come on much sooner, much quicker that way. Along those lines, internet safety. Parents, keep the computer in a public area. And I don't mean public like outside for everyone to access. I mean public like public for your family. Keep it in the living room, the family room, wherever it is that your family spends a lot of time together. Even if you're watching TV while your kid's on the internet, if you just glance over, you can see what they're looking at. Limit their time online. Simple enough. Use parental controls or monitoring software or monitoring service, filters, things like that. But because filters and monitors are not foolproof, obviously they're going to catch the things like the pornography, but they might not catch the stuff like praise to the KKK or praise to whatever nasty gang that you don't like. You might not want your kids looking at that kind of stuff, but it might get through the filter. So you need to be aware of what sites your kids are looking at. Keep your antivirus and your anti-spam software up to date. You can tell your kids all day long, don't click on a link without checking it out and making sure it's okay first, but they're still going to click on it. If it says, hey, download this song now, they're going to click on it. Now, this is an option that you have, but I would suggest that you talk it over with your kids first. This is going to depend on the level of trust between you and your kids. A lot of parents will create their own account on social networking sites, and they will friend their kids. And, yeah, kids can just go get another email address and get another account. But believe it or not, the majority of kids whose parents are on their friends list, they just tone it down in general. They're not cussing. They're not spreading bad rumors or posting compromising pictures. They're not doing any of that stuff because they know mom and dad can see it. And just because, like for example, Facebook, you can set it so only certain people can see certain things, What's to say that mom and dad don't happen to be at their coworker's house or at work or things like that looking on another person's account, and now they can see it. So they tend to keep it toned down in general. Limit or prohibit the use of peer-to-peer networks, file sharing services. Okay, a lot of this has to do with piracy, but also it helps limit viruses, it helps limit all sorts of stuff that you don't want getting onto your computer. You can also limit or block text messaging and web access on your kids' cell phones, especially when it comes to cyberbullying. If your kid can't get text messages or internet, then when they're away from the computer, they're not going to be able to be cyberbullied. It's just that simple. On top of that, we all know bills are expensive, so you can tell your kids, hey, you have this much. You need to keep track. If you go over it, you need to pay it or I take your cell phone away. That works for a lot of kids too, and they know, oh crap, I don't have a job, I can't pay this, I don't have an allowance, or I don't have enough allowance, I got to keep the text messaging in check. Same rules apply to phones, network gaming consoles like Xbox Live, or PlayStation Network, things like that, etc. Anything that's going to give them access online. Now for kids, this is really important stuff, and you can actually go to netsmartskids.org, NETSMARTZ kids.org, and it's a website just for kids. It teaches all about internet safety. Okay, don't give out your personal information online. Don't tell people where you live. Don't tell people where you go to school. Don't tell people how old you are or anything like that. Don't agree to meet people you meet online, offline. If you don't know them in real life, then keep it that way. Don't say or send anything you might later regret. Just because you delete it from your page does not mean that it's actually gone. Everything is on the internet. Once it's out there, and you can never take it back. Even if you send a picture to one person, and you've got a copy and they've got a copy, and you're the only two people with a copy, what's to say that they didn't send a copy to somebody else? So you've deleted your copy, they deleted their copy, but the third person still has it and is still spreading it around. Once it's out there, it's out there. So don't say it or send it. Again, never send compromising pictures. Remember the difference between friends and friends. Friends are people you know in real life that you can trust to have your back, that you hang out with on a regular basis, you get along with. Friends are people, maybe you kind of know them. Okay, maybe you're cool with them, but you don't really hang out with them. You don't know much about them. You didn't hang out with them growing up or anything like that. They're not somebody you can really trust. So, learn about the common online scams. This is more for parents, but it goes for kids too. Kids should know the different ways that accounts can be phished or hacked, or common ways that people will trick them into downloading a virus, things like that, so they can start to learn to avoid those sorts of bad sites. Don't respond or give in to online bullies. Now with in-person bullying, it's not the same as it used to be. Just ignore them, they'll go away, they're just jealous of you, whatever. But with online bullying, it does still work to an extent. If you ignore them, maybe you delete their nasty posts or whatever so they don't spread as much. I mean, obviously somebody's likely to see it at some point, but you can limit the spread. Just don't respond, okay? Don't lash out, lash back. Now parents, by limiting your kids' time online, you limit their chances to build up that frustration and lash out and say something that they might regret to a bully who just uses that as further ammunition to ramp it up. And again, this goes back to the scams. Don't trust that something that's, it's free, no charge, no cost. It's virus-free, guaranteed, 100%, no risk. Those are usually red flags that it actually is not free. It does have a virus. There is risk. It's a common scam, a common tactic with online scams. So, any questions about bullying or internet safety? I know I kind of breezed through some of that real quick. Yes? What's that, sweetie? I'm sorry, I can't hear you, sweetie. Okay. All right. Graffiti and tagging. How are we doing on time? Oh, not too bad. We all know tagging's a big deal up here in Lancaster. We see it everywhere we go. You just told me about some tonight. There's 5 types of graffiti. There's tagging, which is the stuff we see just about every day. It's probably the most prevalent type anywhere you go. It's just somebody that just wants to get some little notoriety, and they just throw their name up all over the place, whether it's little tags like this, fancy what they call pieces, which is where they actually take time and do the big full color stuff. However they want to do it, it's still just them putting their name up. Second most prevalent is gang graffiti. This is claiming their turf, saying, welcome to my hood. You know, my brothers are welcome, the rest of you stay out, type thing. It's just claiming territory, and these are some examples of gang graffiti. You'll notice on the left, you'll see X3. That's usually a giveaway that it's gang graffiti, especially for Southern California Mexican gangs. You get up into Northern California, it's often X4. I'm not really sure why, but that's the way it is. I am not a gang expert. On the right, the OCG actually stands for Original Crip Gangsters, and it's probably also why it's in blue. Hate graffiti. We don't see this too often, thankfully. As you can see on the left, I have blocked it out because it is a dirty word. That is the F word. And it says F Jews and has a swastika. That's obviously hate graffiti. On the right, the Islamic Center of America, you idol worship. Go home, 9/11 murderers. That's hate graffiti. It can be religious. It can be racist. It can be sexual orientation. It can be anything at all. Ethnicity, anything like that. There's message graffiti, which is a lot less common. Message graffiti can be anything. It can be a political message. It can be an advertisement. It can be just straight up, hey, I got out of bed this morning. What do you want? You know, this one is actually a famous graffiti artist who goes by the name of Banksy. He travels between London and Los Angeles on a regular basis, and he puts up artwork all over the place. A lot of message graffiti also falls under art graffiti. And art graffiti, now here's where you draw a fine line. Depending on the graffiti, depending on the artist, depending on the property owner. Some people don't care, some people actively give their permission, and some people still don't like it. Now with Banksy, he's very fortunate because he's very famous, so a lot of property owners are okay with it because it exponentially raises their property values. The one on the left is actually in Los Angeles. It's on a wall of a building right next to a public parking lot, and the owners of that building estimate that it raised their building's value by nearly $1 million. He's very popular. I actually read a story yesterday where a guy in London had scrubbed off some graffiti inside a bathroom at the pub he owned, and found out later it was Banksy and that it was worth around 500,000 pounds. And he was not too happy about it. The one on the right, you see the girl frisking the soldier. We're used to thinking about it the other way around. So that's where you can, on the right, that's sort of an example of both message and art because it is giving a political message there. Graffiti is vandalism. No matter how you slice and dice it, unless you've got explicit permission from the property owner, it's vandalism. Okay, it's a misdemeanor or a felony under state law, depending on the cost of removal, the damages. In Lancaster, every single incident is a felony. The city has figured out that the cost of sending the crew and all the equipment just by itself for each incident is enough to make it a felony, regardless of how big it is. Just the cost of sending the crew. It's unsightly. It's difficult to remove. You got to either sandblast it, paint over it, whitewash it, power pressure washer it. However you do it, it takes time and effort. It brings down property values in the neighborhood, brings down the neighborhood image. It can lead to other crimes. You know, the whole broken windows theory. You leave one window broken, you don't fix it, well now you got two windows broken. Well now you got somebody breaking into it and using it as a crash pad. Now you got somebody else that wants to use it as a crash pad but it's already occupied. Maybe these two guys are from rival gangs or from whatever and they get into a fight and now we got an all-out gang war, all based off of one broken window. It's the same thing with graffiti. And it doesn't just lead to other crimes in terms of other crimes in the neighborhood. Tagging is often the gateway that leads a kid into other crimes on their part. It might lead into not just tagging and vandalism and trespassing, but maybe into burglary, maybe into grand theft. It's their gateway into gangs, things like that. So it's definitely something you want to curb while you can. Turf wars over graffiti, especially with gang graffiti, but you see it sometimes too with tagging. They can escalate into fights or worse. People have died over turf wars because of a can of spray paint. It seems dumb, and it is, but they don't feel that way, and they don't see it that way. They see it as disrespect if you come out and cross off their tag and put yours right up next to it. Some things to look for to tell if your kid may or may not be a tagger. Okay? This is probably one of the biggest giveaways. If you see graffiti-style artwork or writing all over their backpack, all over their notebooks, all over their furniture, maybe on their bathroom mirror, all over their walls, things like that, papers, schoolwork. If they have the really wide tip markers, they're also known as fat caps. And I'm not talking Sir Marks-a-Lot or whatever that you use to mark boxes. I'm talking the kind you have to go to an art store and get, usually. They usually come with like a metal barrel instead of the plastic barrel. We're talking the really extra wide ones. Etching tools. Okay, now unless your kid's an art major, your kid should probably not have the extra fat markers or etching tools. A black book is another pretty good giveaway. It's basically any notebook that they use to practice with. It's probably covered head to toe on the covers. Inside, you'll see page after page. It's just the same tag over and over and over and over and over and over again because they're practicing, they're perfecting it, they're getting their speed up. All it is a practice book. It might be artwork, it might be writing, it might be different styles of the same word because they're trying to figure out how they want to do it, or maybe they want to do it different ways and they want to practice them both. Again, unless your kid's an art major, multiple markers, etching tools, spray paint can tips in their backpack or their room or their other belongings, that could be a sign. And when I say spray paint can tips, I mean just a little plastic tip, because there are places you can buy different tips where you have wide spray, narrow spray, high pressure, low pressure, all sorts of different things like that. You can use some for thicker paints, some for thinner paints. A hoodie, hat, or bandana, things like that to conceal their face from cameras, from passing drivers, things like that. It's not to say that if your kid has a hoodie, they're a tagger. I have a hoodie, okay? Gloves, oftentimes they'll be disposable, so they can take them off, throw them in the trash can, and move on, rather than keep a set of dirty gloves that has paint or marker all over them. But if you do find gloves that have paint or marker on the fingertips, that could be a sign. It's something to think about. Again, just because your kid happens to have graffiti-style artwork on their backpack doesn't necessarily mean that they're a tagger. They might just happen to really like the way it looks. There are some kids like that. But it's something that should trigger you to look more closely and possibly try and see if you can find some of these other things and pay more attention to your kids' activities, particularly at night, particularly on weekends, particularly when they're out with friends. To report graffiti, and if you guys picked up one of these packets with the slides on it, you know, it's already in here. If not, write this down. Our graffiti hotline is the top one. That's our Public Works Department. Palmdale is there, and then if you're outside of Lancaster or Palmdale and you're in the unincorporated areas, the county parts of Quartz Hill, Antelope Acres, Lake LA, places like that, you can call LA County, and that's their graffiti removal hotline. Are there any questions about graffiti? Who doesn't have graffiti? LA, I do not know if Los Angeles has a graffiti hotline or not. I believe they do, but I don't know what it is. I'd have to look it up. But I can definitely put that out there if I do find out. Yeah. Well, you also look at LA and how they're laying people off because they're millions of dollars short on their budget. So it's kind of, that's a tough one. What happens when you catch the taggers? Well, every time graffiti removal goes out and cleans up graffiti, they take a GPS tagged picture of it so we know exactly where it's at. They feed it into a database that we use called Graffiti Tracker. Our detective at the station that does nothing but graffiti has access to that. And whether the kid's arrested here finally, or maybe they're arrested in Palmdale, maybe they're arrested down in Compton or some other place that uses Graffiti Tracker, we find out about it so we can add all our stuff that we've been able to tack to that particular tagger, we can add it onto the case. A lot of times these people are juveniles. A lot of times they are ordered to pay restitution and they get put on probation. Restitution's not cheap. For the city of Lancaster, it's over $400 per incident, and they're actually looking at increasing it because that's not even covering our costs. There are some kids who owe tens of thousands of dollars. The biggest one I've ever seen is a tagging crew that collectively caused over $250,000 worth of damage to the city. Unfortunately, a lot of them are considered to be first-timers. This is their first time that they've been caught. So because it's the first time they've been caught, it's their first offense. They're juveniles, so the system tends to be a little more lenient. We also have a judge up here that wants to give everybody that second chance. Now, if they were adults, it'd be a very different story. I could tell you that right now. Marlene would actually know a little more about this than I would, because she's been handling all of our restitution cases. Excuse me. Yes. Parents responsible for kids tagging. Yeah, what happens if you have a minor that's ordered to pay restitution, the parents or legal guardians, depending on what they have, are jointly responsible. Now, there are some cases where these kids are foster kids, they're wards of the county or wards of the court, so obviously that restitution is never going to come back to us because, say, for example, it happens out in Lake LA, it's a county area. Well, if they're a foster kid under county care, what, is the county just going to pay itself? So things like that to consider. But the parents and legal guardians are jointly responsible with their kids. It can be tacked on to their credit. Their wages can be garnished if it's not being paid. They can be sued for if they're failing to pay, things like that. There are also other things as far as parental responsibility laws that the parent can get their own penalties because they are responsible for their kid messing up. And that's separate from the judgment for the vandalism. Any other questions? I'm sorry? Yeah, as far as, you mean like the victims kind of getting double tagged? Yeah. Yeah, slap on the wrist. I do agree that it is unfair. Unfortunately, we're not the juvenile justice system. We're not the juvenile judge. We don't have a whole lot of control over that. As far as the people whose houses have been tagged or whose businesses have been tagged, the city will come take care of it for free. They'll come remove it for free. Like you said, a lot of times the paint doesn't match perfectly, but if you supply the paint, they will gladly use it. If you happen, like, for example, there are some people that recently painted their house. They happen to have a little paint left over, even if it's just half a gallon. Sometimes half a gallon's all they need. And they know it's the same color because they just used it to paint their house. Or there are other techniques too. There's pressure washing, there's sandblasting, depending on where the graffiti is, what the surface is like, etc. So. Yeah, they don't pay attention to the slap on the wrist. Yeah, no respect. That's where it comes back to opening that dialogue with your kids early, being involved in their lives. The earlier you get that started, the easier it is to get your foot in the door when something starts to slip. It's a lot easier for you to pick up on changes in behavior. Maybe they're sneaking out at night more. You see some of these things. If you pay attention, you can get to them before it gets to that point a lot of times. But if you don't pay attention, you don't have that dialogue, you don't develop that trust, then yeah, it's going to come to the point where almost nothing that the court can do is going to change their attitude. So, any other questions? All right. Gangs. Here we see a whole bunch of gangsters. We've got Hispanic gangs, we've got black gangs, we've got biker gangs. I did not show some of the more extreme gangs, such as the Nazis or the KKK, because they can get pretty nasty sometimes. But you see, the one probably common characteristic, besides the heavy tattoos with the Old English style writing or the graffiti style writing, is each picture seems to have a color. For example, the bottom left corner, they're all wearing red. The bottom right, in the middle, they're wearing blue. Things like that. At the top, they're all wearing, well, most of them are wearing black leather chaps and black leather jackets with the same patches on them. It's just a way to identify themselves, a way to adhere together as a group. Yes, that is an actual LA County Sheriff's deputy, and yes, that is an actual gang member. I don't remember which station this was, but this is not that old a picture. It was taken sometime since 2000. A gang is 3 or more people associated formally or informally who act individually or in concert to commit crimes. And there's a long laundry list of crimes, from murder and rape and arson on down to vandalism, identity theft. Almost anything fits under the gang category. Under the California Penal Code, active membership in a criminal street gang is in and of itself a crime. On top of that, if as a gang member, whether you're acting with your gang or not, maybe you're off on your own, but if you're an admitted gang member of a criminal street gang that's been identified as a criminal street gang, and you get arrested for one of those crimes, you can get a gang enhancement. Depending on the crime, it's anywhere from 1 year to 6 years, on top of the rest of your sentence. Up here in the AV, we've got 2 main types of gangs. We've got black gangs and Hispanic gangs. We also have some biker gangs. We don't have too much of the Asian gangs. You see those more when you get down into some parts of the LA basin. We don't have that too much up here, but there are other gangs too. There are mafias. There are all sorts of things that, yes, they are still out there, and yes, they still exist. It's just that these are the 2 things that we typically deal with up here in the AV. What a lot of parents don't realize is that gang recruitment starts young, often as young as 10 or 11 years. Part of that's because they're really susceptible at that age. Very fragile young minds. They're open to learning and trying new things. They want to meet new friends. It's a socially sensitive age. And so they're more afraid, like, okay, if I tell him no, he might not like me, things like that. But also, when you've got a gang that's breaking into houses as one of their main things, 10 and 11-year-olds can get into much smaller spaces. They can get through much smaller window openings than a full-grown man. So they're very valuable from that sense. Turf wars can have deadly consequences, again, just like we said with tagging. And whether we like it or not, gang membership is often for life. Even if you want out, chances are you're not going to be allowed out. You'll be allowed to sort of fade into obscurity, but you're never truly out of the gang. And especially, heaven forbid, you go try and join a rival gang, because then you're definitely saying, here I am, come take me out. It's like a giant X marks the spot. So whether you like it or not, once you're in for life. Some things to look for. Again, like I mentioned, the blue clothing or the red clothing. If your kid suddenly seems to prefer a particular color, especially if it's a particular shade of that color, for example, half their sweatshirts and maybe all their shoelaces, and they've got a couple bandanas or hoodies that are all the same shade of blue, that could be a sign that they've joined a gang. Or if they start to get red wallets, red sunglasses, red hats, red boxers even. You know, you see the guys that sag their pants and their boxer briefs or their basketball shorts are showing it from underneath their pants. Those are often the gang colors as well. Green is another one that we see sometimes. If your kid suddenly starts to spend an increasing amount of time with new friends that have funny nicknames, Shorty, Long Face, Funky Speech, you know, whatever it is, their nicknames are often based on some kind of physical or psychological trait. If you've got somebody who's got a developmental disorder, maybe they call them Dopey. If you've got somebody who has a bum foot, they might call them, what's the word? Clubfoot, Gimp. That's the word I was trying to think of. They might call him Gimpy. But their nicknames are usually based on some kind of characteristic about them, so they're going to sound funny like that. I mean, how many people do you know on a regular basis that you go around and call gimpy or dopey or shorty? You know, shorty maybe not quite as bad, but still, that's a common gang nickname. Maybe your kid begins to develop a pattern of little infractions. You've got a good kid who's got good grades, and now all of a sudden they're skipping school and getting caught. They're getting caught smoking dope. They're tagging. They're out after curfew, things like that. Seems like little stuff, but that could be the sign that they're starting to get involved with the gang. And because it starts little and it works its way up. They don't just start by saying, okay, kid, go rob this guy. They work you into it. They build your trust up. They build your confidence. They build your level of security. Maybe they've got expensive or new items that you know you didn't buy, and you know they don't have a job, they can't pay for it. They might try and come up with some excuse like, oh yeah, Mikey gave it to me, he didn't need it anymore, or he got a new one. But if they've got some new video games, some new clothes, a new cell phone, whatever the case may be, and you know there's no reasonable way that they could have that financially, that could be a sign to look for. They start wearing flashy jewelry like the little diamond, even if they're fake, the little diamond earrings, the gold chain, stuff like that. This is the biggie, if they've got a growing rebellion. And this is a tough one to gauge because a lot of people, teenagers, rebel. Okay, I admit it, I did it too. I didn't talk to my parents very much when I was a teenager. I much preferred to just hole up in my room and sit on the internet and play games all day. That's what I did. But there is, you know your kids, you can get a sense for what's normal teenage rebellion and what's, okay, there's a definite paradigm shift here. Okay, they got a disrespectful attitude. They don't listen. They sneak out at night. Maybe they start using foul language. Maybe they act like they own the place. And again, I'm not talking about your normal, just teens being teens. I'm talking about seriously disrespectful, serious attitude problems. And it's going to grow. It's not going to be instant overnight, but it is going to happen, and you will start to notice it. Just be aware of it. So those are some things to look for as far as possible gang involvement. Now, if you do suspect that your kid has joined a gang, there are options. You can contact the Lancaster Sheriff's Station and ask to speak to somebody in their on their gang team, and they've got some options. They can point you in a few directions to get you some help to get your kid either out of the gang or keep them from joining it if they haven't yet already. There are other programs, too, called like the VITA program, which is Vital Intervention and Directional Alternatives. It's kind of like a semi-boot camp for troubled kids that's put on by the Sheriff's Department a couple times a year. Any questions about that stuff? All right. I have two more sections. This one's really quick because it's emergency preparedness as it relates to kids. Okay. Have a kit and a plan. Include your kids in the planning process. A plan's all well and good, but if it doesn't work for your kids, you know, you're saying, okay, everybody's going to grab one of these 55-gallon tubs and we're going to get them down the stairs. Well, a 10-year-old's not going to be able to pick up a 55-gallon tub or even drag a 55-gallon tub full of food and supplies down the stairs. So you need to include your kids in the planning process. There are other things that they might really, really want in a kit, like a teddy bear or a coloring book, that you might not even think about because you're thinking about food, water, first aid. Regularly practice emergency drills, you know, the stop, drop, and roll, the fire drills, the earthquake drills, get under the table and hold on, how to evacuate if you need to, things like that. Make sure your kids know the name and phone number of your out-of-state contacts so that if you're separated when something happens, maybe you're at work, your kid's at school, your kid's at home with an older sibling, but you're at the grocery store, whatever the case may be, they can still get in touch with your out-of-state contact as well because they know who it is. Learn your kids' school's emergency plans. If something happens, if an earthquake happens tomorrow morning at 10 o'clock, you're at work, your kids are at school, you should be aware of how your kid's school is going to provide for your kids until it's safe for you to go get them. Okay? Every school has an emergency plan. I believe it's mandated by law, so you should be aware of what it is. A lot of schools, especially for the younger kids, will ask the parents to create a little small kit. Usually it's got some comfort items, things like that, non-perishable food, and they keep that in a special storage container marked with the kid's name and everything so that if something happens, they can pull that out and give it to that kid. It might have a small teddy bear or a handheld game or something. You should review and update your plan and kit at least once a year. I recommend every 6 months because you got to rotate your canned goods, and every 6 months is a good time to do that to make sure nothing is expired. And make sure you consider the ages of your kids when you're developing your plan or your kit and whenever you review it and update it. You know, kids grow, and kids' tastes in food change. You might have a kid that absolutely loves corn when they're 3 years old, but by the time they turn 4, they can't stand it, and all they want is carrots now. So if you have nothing but canned corn, you got to keep that in mind so you can get rid of some of that canned corn, rotate it out into your normal pantry stores to use every day, and get some canned carrots to replace it with. Also, their clothes. You should always have spare clothes for everybody. You need to make sure that the clothes you have for your kids are actually going to fit your kids. Okay, spare shoes do no good if they won't go on the kids' feet. So, it is Emergency Preparedness Month. September is National Emergency Preparedness Month. I do have a lot of information on that back table about emergency preparedness, particularly as it relates to developing a family plan, developing a disaster kit, and things to keep in mind when it comes to your kids. So if you have any questions, please grab that stuff. All right. This is the last section we've got tonight. We actually made pretty good time. Okay. Distracted driving is a biggie. Distracted driving is probably as big as bullying. Distracted driving affects everybody, just like bullying does. Believe it or not, studies have been done. Researchers at University of Utah found that talking on a cell phone increases your chances of having a collision by 400%. That's the same as being the legal limit for alcohol, 0.08. If you're texting while you're driving, that actually doubles on top of that. It's 800% greater than when you're sober. Using a cell phone while you're driving takes 37% of your brain activity off the road and puts it on the cell phone, whether or not you're using a hands-free. If you're on a Bluetooth, it's still that same 37% that's off the road and on your conversation. So you shouldn't talk on the phone at all unless you absolutely must because it's an emergency. If it can't wait, you pull over and have your conversation there. It's just the safest thing to do. 80% of all crashes and 65% of all near crashes involve some type of distraction. You're eating, you're changing the radio station, you're rummaging through your purse to find the dollar bill before you hit the drive-thru, whatever the case may be. It's any activity that takes any part or all of your attention away from the road. Putting on makeup, changing CDs, even just talking to the person in the seat next to you. You know, you're looking at the road and you're paying attention to the other drivers, but again, part of your brain is now on this conversation when, if you were by yourself and not having that conversation, it would all be on the road. In 2008, this is the most recent year I was able to find statistics for, 6,000 people were killed in crashes involving a distracted driver. Over 500,000 more were injured. So it's a pretty big cause here. Some real life examples. Sure, we all remember the Metrolink train crash. Maybe you two kids don't. But the Metrolink train crash in 2008 in Chatsworth, the conductor admitted that, well, actually he didn't admit, the kid who was texting him admitted it because the conductor died in the crash along with several other people. It was the second worst commuter train crash in history. He missed a red light because he was busy texting and collided with an oncoming freight train. 2007, right out here on Avenue D, when we had the bad dust storms that you couldn't see beyond your windshield. Okay, the guy admitted that he was turning the radio or fiddling with the volume or something. He actually, I don't know, I wasn't able to clarify if he clipped the car in front of him, if he full-on rear-ended him, what happened, but he hit the car in front of him. They obviously did their crash thing and stopped. Well, nobody else could see. Before you knew it, you had 31 vehicles involved, including 2 semis. It was 2 deaths. It took several hours to clear up because they had to wait for the dust storms to clear for part of it. It was a nasty pileup, all because somebody was adjusting their radio. Just last week, actually, on Monday, a motorcyclist in South Dakota was stopped behind 2 other vehicles at a road construction site. You know, they have the slow and stop signs that, you know, depending on which way they're letting traffic go. Well, he was stopped waiting for it to change from stop to slow. Guy behind him admitted that he was distracted by his cell phone, ran right into him. There were a total of 4 cars involved, and the motorcyclist died. Two years ago in Utah, in fact, right after the Metrolink crash, a semi-driver admitted that he was texting on the phone, didn't see a school bus that was stopped, hit the school bus full tilt and pushed it over 200 feet before the school bus burst into flames. There were 21 students on board. All but one of them made it out safely. That one was killed. So distracted driving is very serious. It has deadly consequences, and it's the kind of thing you think, oh, it's just a quick text message, I'm so good at this. Well, you guys saw the one little PSA that I played before we started. You know, she was so good at it, but now ever since the crash, everything's different. It doesn't matter how good you think you are, don't be distracted. And especially with our kids, our teenagers, they're young drivers, they're inexperienced, they don't have the same ability to watch for everything at once because they haven't developed it. They haven't been driving that long. And especially when you've got treacherous conditions. It's rainy, it's windy, it's dusty or snowy and you can't see very far. Things like that. Fog, you know, heavy traffic, all sorts of things like that. And then you combine it, you throw in a teenager's propensity to speed because teenagers are reckless and feel like they're invincible and they just want to go fast, or maybe they want to show off. One little distraction is enough to kill them. So please, please, please stress that to your kids. All right, this last slide, before I turn to it, I want to give you some warning. It is extremely realistic. It is a short video that was done by a gentleman in Britain, a filmmaker. It's about 4 minutes long. He actually used his own son in the video. You'll see a little toddler in there. It's very graphic. It's extremely realistic. If you don't want me to play it, I won't, because I do see little ones in the audience. If you do, but you don't want them to see it, I suggest you take them outside. And I'll go ahead and wait a moment. Okay.
Hi, James. My mate Jules fancies you. Pass. It's not even funny now. Let me just get his number.
Bring an ambulance! Bring an ambulance! Stay still! I can't open the door. I've rung an ambulance.
We've got other people on the route to help, okay?
Please, just look straight at me for a second.
3 vehicles have been involved.
Right.
2 people in the vehicle there. I can't get any response out of them
Are they the ones in the front or the ones in the front?
Mommy, Daddy, wake up! Mommy, Daddy, wake up!
I just can't get any response whatsoever.
I want Mommy and Daddy to wake up.
Any pain in your neck at all?
nice and still for me. All right? Keep looking at me. All right?
Cassie?
Cassie, can you hear me? What's your friend's name in the back? What is it? Jules, is it? Nice and still there for me.
And this is all because of one text message that she was sending while her friends were in the car and also distracting her. And if you notice, she's the only one that's still alive, besides the little kid.
Yeah, you're going to be okay. We need to get you off the hospital.
Yes, this will be on the city's website. It's also on Channel 28. So if you do watch it online later with your kids, just keep in mind that this is the last part of it. Yes, this will be on there. I'm also going to have the PowerPoint on there as well, so you can go through that with your kids of all ages. Channel 28 is the city's local cable channel. If you have Time Warner cable, you get it. If you have satellite, unfortunately, they do not have it. Channel 3 is the local Time Warner cable for all of Antelope Valley. 28 is Lancaster, and it's either 27 or 29 is Palmdale. But that's our presentation. Does anybody have any questions, any thoughts, any comments, anything like that? Well, thank you. Sleepy. Yeah. I actually got you out here a bit earlier than I was expecting, so yay for that. And I apologize if I kind of rushed through it. I just knew I had a ton of info to get through, and I didn't want to skip anything or have it left out. So thank you for coming, and have a great evening. Sure.